So I want to welcome you to Recovery and glad you're here. My name is Mark, believer in Jesus Christ, and I struggle with codependency. We're doing a series on relationships, and tonight we're going to have a lovely conversation about resentments. So there is all kinds of important writing in the big book of AA and in books like the 12 and 12, 12 Steps and 12 Traditions about resentment. And you can pretty much get to a place of saying that AA, NA, Al-Anon are all SA will all recognize resentment as maybe the prime source driver for a whole lot of people in terms of where the pain in life that's unspoken lives. You know, like you can sort of go, well, isn't having a resentment towards somebody like being angry at them? And I can answer the question, it's really not. And like, here's the difference. If I'm really angry with you, I am likely gonna come to you, am I not? And I'm likely gonna tell you, man, this is where you and I are sideways, right? I disagree with you about this, and this is what I disagree about, and this is where I think you blew it, and you're either gonna come to terms with that or you're not, but I'm gonna get it there right now. But in a lot of ways, developing a resentment happens because, number one, I don't talk to you about what is going on with me, right? I hold it. Number two, a difference being that a resentment generally forms around a piece of me that is, there's an emptiness there, or there's an unfulfillment there, or there's something that's being triggered there. There's some piece of me from my history or my past there's like a hole somewhere in my soul that you inadvertently, probably in a lot of cases, happen to hit. And when you hit it, I kind of went deeper into that, right? When I went deeper into that, I began to develop this resentment toward you, meaning it's not just that I was angry at you, because I would have dealt with that in that sort of, flash mode. But it's that now you're in my bones. You know, you're literally in my bones. And now I can't get you out of my bones. And now you're in my thoughts. And now you're occupying you're occupying a place in my heart, right? That's not healthy for me, but you're occupying one. And now I've given you a substantial amount of emotional, probably mental, and definitely some spiritual power. That's why the big book of A goes, the number one offender for compulsive activity is resentment. Here's what it says. Resentment destroys more compulsives or alcoholics than anything else. From it stems all forms of spiritual disease. For we have been not only mentally and physically ill, we have become spiritually sick. When the spiritual malady is overcome, we straightened out mentally and physically. Did you get that? When the hard part got straightened out, we became better physically and mentally. In dealing with resentments, we have to set them onto paper. I'll talk about that later. We listed people, institutions, or principles with whom we were angry. And what they're talking about is the work that is going to get there. We're going to get into it here in a few weeks with something called Step 4. You hear us read Step 4, every week when you're here. Man, it's a tough piece of work. Always going to recommend that you do that with a sponsor. We're not going to work a fourth step here when we get into the steps, but we're going to learn how one is put together, what some of the tools are that you can use to get there, and why it's critical that you do that piece of work with the sponsor. That's what they're talking about, putting it on paper. We listed people, institutions, or principles with whom we were angry and resentful. We ask ourselves why we were angry. I would add to that, we also got to ask ourselves to deal with this, what is hurting inside of us? What part of me did you touch that you're probably not even aware of that pinpointed something that I have kind of been on the run from or trying to avoid? Does Does that make sense? You know, like in most cases, we were waiting emotionally and spiritually for the right person to come along to produce a resentment that we were already vulnerable to. Are you following that? We were already like kind of available to. You just happened to come along and execute it. That's like we ask ourselves why we were angry. In most cases, it was found that our self-esteem, our pocketbooks, our ambitions, our personal relationships were in play. It is plain that a life which includes deep resentment leads only to futility and unhappiness. To the precise extent that we permit these, do we squander the hours that might have been worthwhile in our lives. But with those of us that are compulsive, whose hope is maintenance and growth of a spiritual experience, this business of resentment is infinitely grave. It gets harder. We found that it's fatal. For when harboring such feelings, we shut ourselves off from the sunlight of the Holy Spirit. The insanity of alcohol or our compulsion returns and we use again. And with us, to use is to die. Regardless of what the compulsion is, it always brings about a fatality of emotion, heart, spirit, and even a physicality, you know, a physical fatality. That's what happens. For us to use is to die. Big Book, page 64 and 66. Resentment, the word, if you break it down, resentment means to feel again. It's kind of like, I don't know about you, but if there's a certain kind of pizza and a certain kind of like Italian sauce on Italian food. There aren't a lot of things like this for me, but that's one of them. If now I've realized over the last few years, like if I were to eat a pizza with this certain kind of sauce, and it's 8 o'clock at night, if I have not had one of those, and I'm not gonna be able to say this correctly, and I don't really care, it's like osnaprezone or ospresenone or who the hell knows what it is, but that's one of those little pills that deals with indigestion in advance. I will definitely be jacked up that night. You know, and I will be like in the Rolaids pipeline. And I mean, I will be paying for it for a while. And I will go back and try to remember all the things they tell you about indigestion, like sleep on your left side, doesn't work. Get up might work for a little while, but you know, laying down isn't worth a hoot, man. And the thing about it is like, I know that's coming, but I do not do an adequate job then of protecting myself because I should have taken that osnaprezone, whatever it is, about 4 o'clock. Whatever it is, I should have taken it earlier. That's the thing. And this word means I feel it, like I feel that tomato sauce. Over 4 times later, you know, I had that pizza 4 times. You know, I had it for a while. I had it at 1 o'clock in the morning. I really thought I had it at 6:30 at night, but I did not. I'm still having it at 1 o'clock. That's what resentment means. What has happened to you with that person is always on you. Are you following that? You're always thinking about them. Matter of fact, you meet somebody else, they're a total stranger. They say something to you, and your mind is going, she's just like Jeannie. She's just like her. It's like, what is it where are you making that association? Well, it's the way she talks. It's her voice. I mean, this is kind of how it goes because you're carrying that around with you at such a level that it's always fresh, it's always available, and it's always present. Are you following that? That relationship is always right there. Maybe it's your mom, maybe it's your dad, maybe it's your friend, sibling, ex-husband, ex-wife. Could be a lot of things. It absolutely could be the way you've tried to deal with the trauma. It's not, that won't free you, but it could be a way, right, that you're trying to come to terms with the trauma is to go, I will build a resentment about this person in order to, or what has happened to me in order to protect myself. But it means to feel again, it means I keep getting angry over and over and over again, just with certain sensations about this person or about an institution, the way a hospital treated me, the way a police officer treated me, the way a doctor did, the way somebody in business did, the way the tax man did, whatever, the way I lost a job with the company and this is how they mistreated me, that kind of an institution. It creates emotional bondage because the enemy is having a field day with us. And what he's trying to do is get us to take the bait to work ourselves into a place where the only thing we're concerned about is getting even. Like one of the best fuels of maintaining a resentment is to live for the day when you will finally get even with General Electric or Lenore City Utility Board or I don't know. But somebody or something, right, who did us wrong, there's an injustice. It is like it happened 5 years ago, but it's like it happened a half an hour ago, and it's just like that pizza. And it's putting us in literally in an emotional bondage place. Like one of the quotes I was reading when I was working on this is this is really interesting, but it goes, as long as you resent one of your parents, you will never actually be able to grow up. I'm like, whoa. Like, just think about that a minute, because what they're saying is, as long as you have resentment with one of your two parents, and it's an active resentment, and you're not coming to terms with it, no recovery, not dealing with it, you're going to continue to look at that resentment with your parent, your mom or your dad, right, as if it is still in play, as if you were still 10, 13, whatever. And so that's going to hold you hostage in that place in your life until you learn how to get the right kind of recovery to be free from that. That's what's going to happen. And it's kind of like one of the toughest places that we're going to get to in our lives is a nonstop activity of blaming. I mean, like, have you ever met somebody? Have you ever met 100 people? I mean, have you met people that what they are capable of doing right then is blaming somebody else for whatever, right? Like, very popular, very active in active addiction, obviously. Very popular in active compulsion. Creates a lot of energy. It just keeps feeding the beast. It keeps feeding the disease. It's like anything. That's like why step one is the breakdown step. Came to terms with the fact that I'm powerless over what's happening to me. And life's unmanageable. Well, there's no, if it only weren't for her, there's none of that in that step, right? It's the breakdown step of going, let's not focus on the blaming, because the blaming, even if it's legitimate, is killing you. Blaming is kind of the essence of our sickness. And if we don't begin to name a resentment that we have, it'll eventually name us. It's kind of like, why am I so, and more and more, I'm pushing this way. Why am I so insistent that when people start to do the hard work of recovery, let's say they do inpatient treatment, or they do outpatient treatment, or they just start working really hard in AA or NA or Al-Anon, and they're going to meetings on the reg and the whole deal. One of the things I'm going to say is, I really, really want to ask you, would you please consider going and doing some good work in therapy? Because there's a lot of stuff that's bubbling up right now. You have kind of made yourself available, and I'm asking you if you would please use that tool, right, as a part of your recovery. When people come back from treatment, I start right before they ever get back, talking to their friend, their mom, their dad, their spouse, going, I really, really, really need you to support an aftercare plan for this person that's going to involve some counseling, some therapy, because you're going to have to figure out how to name that resentment. You're going to have to figure out where it comes from, why you are vulnerable to the way that this particular thing happened to you, and why it's getting, why it's absolutely getting the best of you, why it's dominating you, why you're focusing really on that. And I'd like it if you'd see somebody, obviously, that understood like maybe how to pray, so that you can learn how to pray for a focus together on that particular resentment. Like, one of the things about it is I think sometimes we think if we really talk about it out loud, people are going to think we're irrational, or they're going to think we're, like out of bounds or whatever, we're being unreasonable. And like, the truth of it is, we get this, don't we? We're all talking about it anyway in one way or another, are we not? We're talking about it in our relationships. Like, we're sitting there having a conversation with person A. For some reason, for that 1 minute, they remind us of the object of our resentment, and they get the whole mother load. And you're like, if you're that person, you're like, whoo, you first of all, if you're good codependent, you try to figure out what you did. Now, if you're not a codependent, then you kind of go, well, what in the world happened to him? Where in the world did that come from? I feel like I just got hit by a waterfall. And so you go to him, and just a surefire deal. We're dealing with one of these babies, these resentments. You go, hey, can you tell me like what happened? Now, honestly, unless they have some recovery, most guys aren't going to ask that question. They would just kind of like it to go away, which it will not, but they would like it if it would just kind of go away, right? But women you might ask us that question. Like, can you tell me what that was really all about? And what's going to happen is, probably with no recovery, we're going to try to make up some reason that really has nothing to do with what's actually happening. Because if we told you what's actually happening, we would begin to unsource the energy that we're feeling that's somehow motivating us to this self-destructive stuff that we're probably not fully aware of. That's kind of the way resentments work. And it's not, I don't want to the conversation as well, but some of these resentments are completely justified. It's like, with my hand raised, I understand. I'm the guy that, when I was living in Hilton Head, and my first wife was really struggling mightily with alcohol, and my kids were in the middle of all that with us, they were little. And I'm sitting there, and I'm like going and talking to the equivalent of what you would call in the Methodist Church, our bishop. And I'm driving up to Columbia, and I'm thinking when I get there to Columbia and I get to this guy's office, he's going to go, man, I see you're really kind of having a hard road of this. What can we do to help you? And I'm kind of looking. I took somebody with me from our church, because I thought somehow that would be a good idea. It turned out to be a really good idea. But so we sit down, and I go into his office, and he goes, man, I got to just tell you, first 2 minutes in his office, I got to tell you, Mark, how disappointed I am in your leadership, at Christ Lutheran. Now, I'm sitting there, this church, when I started there, we had about 175 people at worship on Sunday. By now, we had added a first contemporary service on Hilton Head and all this. We had grown to like 1,200 people on Sunday morning. Built this whole new thing. So, I was thinking about that. The year that he's talking about, we baptized 215 adults. And so this guy's sitting there telling me how disappointed he is in my leadership. And I'm going, yeah, help me understand what you're disappointed in. Well, I don't understand why any kind of a pastor can't keep his wife under control. I'm like, yeah? Yeah, I don't know why you can't just get this done. What kind of a husband are you anyway? It's embarrassing that we have a pastor whose wife is going through this and you can't make it stop. And I'm not going to put up with it. Now, the person I brought with me is going, she's looking at him, she's going, I'm not really sure who you think you are, but you're a human being and I'm a human being and Mark's a human being. And you need to learn how to treat human beings or you need to quit your job. And he goes, well, no, I don't think you understand. And she goes, no, I don't think you understand. She goes, I don't know how you do that to somebody anybody that's obviously hurting like this. What is your story? Well, if I would have not gotten the right kind of recovery, and if I would not have gotten the right kind of therapy, you have to be nuts to think that I'd be standing here tonight doing this. I would have done anything. I would have done anything other than continue on trying to be a pastor. If I had moved through this going, I'm going to hold on to his understanding of this as my focus of what the body of Jesus looks like. And I kind of had to work on over time unraveling that whole conversation, right? And kind of going, what we're going to get down to is we have somebody that is somehow in his own life afraid of talking about this disease. I don't know who it was in his family or what happened to him or what his fear level is, but he obviously has one. He obviously has one. If we don't name the resentment, it's going to name us. What they do for us is they allow us to decide, just like I could have right then and did for a while, they allow us to decide that we're going to be both judge and jury for other people. We're going to be both judge and jury. We're not going to do what we were talking about the other week, which is how do you put yourself in their shoes? This guy had zero clue how to do that. But I don't know why. I would honestly right now like to go back to him and go, could we talk about why that happened? That would be so helpful to him. It would be so helpful. Could we please talk about how that happened? But the judge and jury thing is a dangerous place to live. Again, it puts me in the God seat. And I don't really have a place in the God seat. What I've got to do with narcissism is what I've got to do with a lot of other stuff in my life, which is what? I got to learn how to dismantle my narcissism. I got to learn how to dismantle my belief that somehow with this person or event or institution, I really reside in the God seat. Because I really don't. It's why we get to step one and we talk about life being overwhelming and me not being able to control what's happening to me. We talk about that I'm powerless. Step two, we talk about the fact that I'm going to have to figure out how to restore my relationship with a power greater than me in order to be healthy, right? And step three, we say, now those two things are true. So the first two steps are like diagnostic steps. And now we get to step three. Step three is the very first action step. Step three says I'm going to turn my life and my life and will over to the care of God. From then on, after that first action step of step three, you're going to go through several, we're going to see this when we get into it, but you're going to go through several steps now that are going to define for you how to work at turning your life and your will over to God, right? It's like most of us, when we get to step three, we like the theory of that. We like the theory of that. But it's like I was doing a little bit of this in step three yesterday at the Knoxville Area Rescue Mission. And I was a hypothetical, but I was like, yeah, well, what happens with that life and will thing? I'm okay with turning over my life circumstances to God. That's fine, because they're probably not going that well anyway. I could use the help, right? But then they get to this lovely thing of the will. And God goes, well, Mark, here's the deal, the will. I would really like it if you would think about, matter of fact, I'm going to insist that you decide you're going to be a missionary and you're going to go to Korea. I'm going to go, God? The thing about it is I'm pretty well set up here. I'm pretty close to our kids and our grandkids and stuff. I kind of like where I'm living. Carol, she's not going to be all hepped up on commuting 19 hours to Atlanta. And I don't know how it's going to go. And God's going, Mark, will. The word is will. Your will, my will. How are we going to play it? What are we going to do? Life and will. And I'm going to go, yeah, I'll get back to you when I work steps 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Because in step 4, I'm going to realize, man, I really do kind of like being in charge of things. I like things being convenient. I like working my own plan. I kind of like Knoxville, and kind of like where I am in life right now. And God, this Korea thing, can we just talk frankly? It's just stupid, man. Why would I go to Korea? And God's going to go, well, I didn't really ask you. I didn't ask you for a rational. We're not having a rational conversation here. We're having a will conversation. And I go, yeah, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I'm starting to see why those steps, how those go along with, like, basically we're saying those steps right there, they're going to teach you how to do step 3. Like, step 3 sounds so good. Everyone wants to agree with step 3. Amen? Of course I'm going to turn my life. You know, if I had one person tell me that I've had 200, well, I turn it all over to God. Like, you mean the stuff you didn't like? What about the stuff that you did like in your life? You turn that over? I mean, like what about this lovely thing of like loving to be able to hate this person right here in your life? What about this lovely resentment that gives you so much fire, that makes you feel so much better, that makes you feel so much more superior, that makes you feel so much more understanding of them than you could ever imagine? That could never be you. It can never be you. It's like, has it ever occurred to you that there's somebody out in this world, for some reason, I don't know why, that they hold a first-class bona fide resentment toward you? Like, have you ever had somebody come up to you and tell you that's in recovery? Because I have. Man, do you know that for 5 years I really resented you for this? You're like, yeah, okay, that's just great. I mean, thanks for sharing. That's hard to hear, man. It's really important because everybody gets free on that day. That's Freedom Day. Everybody gets free. You know, but we all just like the stuff with boundaries, we all want to play it out in a different way. We're like, well, I don't really know. I mean, like if I really tell her that I've had this resentment toward her, what's she going to think? How's she going to feel? It's like, I don't have a clue, man. She's responsible for that. You're responsible for telling her the truth. I believe the Holy Spirit will intervene and everybody will get free if everybody's willing to be open to that. That's what I think is going to happen. That's what I think happens with resentments. You know, it's like the inventory piece of dismantling some of this goes like, when that happened to you, when you met this person, and when she did that to you, or when he did that to you, you know, how did that hurt you? What hurt did that tap in your life? When that happened to you, what did that make you remember? When your husband decided he was going to sleep with somebody else, and he did that, and you decided that you would go on a 5-year drinking extravaganza trying to make that pain go away, and for a while it worked until it didn't. What was it about your husband sleeping with somebody else that put all the pain into you? Because it didn't just generate itself spontaneously. And you realize, wow, you know what it was? Like it was my dad. It was my dad, because my dad always paid more attention to my little sister. Like she was always much more like him. She was always his favorite. She was always the one. And I never felt like I had his attention or his real interest. I mean, I was there and he loved me and all, but I didn't feel like, it was not like with her. And you go, and there's the pain, and there's the emptiness, and there's how it's like, is it really hurtful that your husband slept with somebody else? It is. But when you keep trying to figure it out and you're harboring his infidelity as if it's yours, and the resentment is wrecking every relationship in your life, why is that happening? Because of the unresolved pain that's coming out of what happened between you and your dad. And that's where it lives. And the resentment that you couldn't speak about was with your dad. And now you got a double going on because you got your dad and you got your husband. And man, that's hard. Like most resentments have a pre-existing determinative set of emotions that are occurring in you or available in you that you might not even be aware of. Does that make sense? And when this person ends up with you and you feel all this, that's what that inventory is all about. Why did I feel the way I feel when that happened? Deuteronomy 29 says this, I'm making this promise with you so that no one among you, no man, no woman, no clan or tribe will turn away from the Lord our God to worship these gods or other nations, and so that no root among you bears bitter and poisonous fruit. The root that he's talking about is resentment, or one of them. 29 more. Those who hear the warnings of this curse should not congratulate themselves, thinking, I am safe, even though I'm following the desires of my own stubborn heart. Assume total and complete responsibility for the people, places, and things that I resent. Like, that's recovery. That's empowering, isn't it? That is power for us in a healthy way. Power in a healthy way with resentments says that people are really responding in a lot of ways to how I'm treating them. People are really responding in a lot of ways to how I'm treating them. Not always, but a lot of times true. Number two, by changing how I function with you, whether I resent you or not, by changing how I function with you, I might be able to change how you treat me. 3, changing myself seems to change you. Changing myself seems to have an effect on you. I am not talking about resentments that involve significant trauma, sexual abuse, rape, incest, violation of, physical violation. I'm not talking about that. Whole different conversation. Then the flip to empowerment is, I'm going to choose to continue to blame other people, and I'm going to continue to play the victim, the role of victim. That's going to be disempowering. What I'm going to do is I'm going to always find my way to successfully criticizing somebody else for something else. It's always going to allow me to avoid responsibility for what the truth of the problem is. And 3, it's going to keep me from having to look at that inventory about what is really hurting in me. Why is this hurting me so much? Why is this having this kind of an effect on me? What is that really all about? Some of the stuff that I'm going to share with you that comes out of a book that a doctor actually wrote, and this doctor actually is a cardiologist, and this doctor actually did this massive piece of research on the connection between heart failure and resentments and what comes out of those two things. And man, it was fascinating. And so he comes up with these several pieces I'm going to share with you about what to do with our resentments. Some may work for you, some may not. A lot of it is AA sort of based, because he's talking about the necessity of the process of writing stuff down. So he goes, number 1, choose a person, institution, or a principle with whom you have a resentment. Number 2, write down exactly what you're still angry about telling the story with all the gory details and sounding like a victim whenever you want to, whenever it's appropriate. It's part of the venting, right? Number 3, now rewrite your story. This is unbelievable. Rewrite your story disregarding the other person entirely. When done properly, your story should document precisely how you are responsible for whatever angry event transpired. Is there any piece of you that comes into play with this? You may end up saying no, but the thing about writing the story without that person will get you there, right? It'll get you to that accuracy. 4, share this new story, adding back in, what you know now to be truth. Share this news story with somebody you trust, like a sponsor, and ask if they hear you sounding accountable for the truth of that story. Number 5, wash, rinse, repeat. Rewrite the story as needed until you are no longer seeing yourself as a victim and you have accepted responsibility for the story. Not that it is your fault, but you've accepted the responsibility for going, that really is the truth about what happened. It's not a matter of going, I'm responsible for what he did. That's not true. It's I'm going to be responsible for being able to tell the truth that really did hurt me. This really did happen. This person really was abusive. This really was what occurred. That's part of this story. Read the story to yourself and notice when your inner voice argues that all you can do really in this is be a victim. Write those specific events of why that is down on paper. When you've identified all the log jams, stop and analyze every event until you uncover something you did or said that could have caused whatever happened to happen. And maybe again, the answer to that is, I didn't cause any of that. And 8, once you can own it all, it is now time to take action. Seek out that person, place, or institution and come to terms with, what an amends might be like. Or in the case of that kind of an inquiry, you may end up realizing, I was not a player in that. I've done an inventory. I was not a player in that. I did get violated, and what I'm gonna do is, I'm not gonna be asked to forget that like this event never happened. I am gonna use the forgiveness in the heart of Jesus to forgive that person, because I know that they will hold me captive until I do. I'm not being asked to forget. I'm not being asked to act like it didn't happen. Forgiveness is about setting myself free.